Good morning to all of you. Let me introduce myself first. So, I am Dr. Sandeep Chakrabarty from Computer Science Department at Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. This course is about the operating system preview, where I will discuss about the very basic things of operating system, starting from the say range and starting from how the operating system has been introduced and what are the different components of operating system and what are different factors which are being considered during the design and development of operating system. Broadly, as you know, we have a 6-hour course. So, I will just try to cover the very basics, and then the advanced things you are always feel comfortable to drop me an mail. This material. Coming to the course content. So, my email ID is given here. So, if you have any question regarding the advanced topic of operating system, or if you want to ask something online, please feel free to drop me an email. Let us start about this course. These are the various topics that we will cover as a part of this course. So, today we will talk about the very basics of the operating system concept. So, we will start from the history of operating system, how it has been introduced, following by the basic architectures that are being covered in a operating system environment. Then we will discuss about different type of modules which are there inside an operating system, and primarily we will try to cover the fundamental modules which are there. And today we will start with the concept of process that will be mostly covered in today's talk. In the next talk, the day 2 talk, we will talk about or discuss about the process management aspects. There we will discuss about the different aspects of process scheduling, followed by the process synchronization and deadlock concepts. And finally, if we have time on day 2, we can start about the very basics of memory management. And on day 3, we will discuss about memory management in details, and there we will talk about the particularly the virtual memory management. So, memory management is a huge topic in operating system. So, we may not be able to cover the whole thing, but I will try to cover the fundamental things which will be useful for building up your concept. And then for the advanced topics, I will provide you the sufficient pointers through which you can go through the details, and if you have any question, please feel free to drop me an email. Okay. So, these are the two books that I will mostly follow in the course. So, the first book is Operating System Principles by Silversich and Galvin and Crane. So, this is a very fundamental books of operating system principles which most of the institutes worldwide cover. And the second book is Modern Operating Systems by Andrew S. Tannenbaum. So, both of these books are very good for clearing your doubts about the fundamentals of operating systems. So, feel free to use these books for your learning part. Now, regarding the slides, just a disclaimer that most of the slides I have borrowed from the slides given against the book Operating System Concepts by Silversich, Galvin and Crane. So, the slides are available online. So, many of the slides I have taken from there and then modified it to suit our purpose. All the slides covering the different chapters of the operating system concept books by Galvin that are available online. So, you can go there and you can also download those slides. So, coming to the fundamentals of operating systems. So, what is a operating system? See, in traditional computer system, the base of the computer system is developed by the hardware components. So, the hardware component, they basically have build up the fundamental blocks of a computer. So, the question comes that how a human user will interact with the hardware, because it is always difficult to directly operate the hardware by triggering some kind of signals at the hardware level, and then processing the hardware directly to do some kind of computation. So, this operating system, it actually work as a middleware or work as a middleman which help the human user to operate with a computer. So, broadly we can say that the operating system is a program that acts as an intermediary between a user of a computer and the computer hardware. So, this operating system helps the user to send different instructions to the computer in a easy way, which is human readable, which is human understandable, and then it basically convert the human instructions to the hardware, to the instruction that the hardware understand. So, the broad goals of the operating systems are: first is the execute the user programs. So, the broad goals of operating system is first to execute the user program and making solving a problem easier. So, that way an idea can be like this: hardware they use complex machine instructions, and this operating system provides some human readable instructions which which the operating system actually interpret, convert them to the machine understandable instruction, and then execute it on top of a hardware. So, for example, I hope many of you are familiar with this C programming language. Say for example, whenever you are writing a program in C, during that time you write some program and then directly execute it. Now, whenever you are writing say a printf statement to print something on a screen, the question comes that how a machine will understand that. So, that is the operating system which actually convert that printf statement to something like this machine instructions which a machine understand, through which a machine can display whatever you want to print on a desktop, on a monitor. That particular task is done by the operating system. Then the second goal of the operating system is making the computer system convenient to use, and then the third one is to use the computer hardware in an efficient manner. So, nowadays you will see that whenever we use the operating system, we actually do something called the multitasking. So, later on I will go to the details of what this mean by multitasking and what are the different features in multitasking, but broadly it means that you are executing multiple application on top of your system. So, for example, in the background, say you are assume that you are playing some music in a music player, and at the same time you are browsing internet. So, you are using a browser, say you are using Google Chrome browser, and at the background you are playing a music using a VLC media player. Now, this way multiple applications are running on your system, but the amount of hardware that you have, it is constant. You have a single display device, you have a single input output device in your operating system. Inside your hardware you have a single processor which can process instructions, then you have a fixed amount of memory. So, the question comes that whenever you have this multiple type of hardwares, then how effectively this multiple process can utilize the hardware. So, for that operating system actually helps to run such kind of multiple process simultaneously, and then help to effectively utilize the hardware resource that you have. So, if you look into broadly the computer system architecture, different components of a computer system. So, these are the four fundamental components of a computer system. The first in the hardware, which basically provides the basic computing resources like your CPU, the processor, the memory, then different type of input output device like your monitor which displays something, or the keyboard which takes input from a user. Then there is the operating system which actually controls and coordinates the use of hardware among multiple applications and users. The third component is the application program. So, on top of your operating system, you are running multiple type of applications. You can run a single application, or later you will see that nowadays actually we run some hundreds of applications simultaneously on top of our operating system. So, applications can be like a word processor, like a Microsoft Word, different type of compilers which actually converts your say whenever you are running a C program, it converts your C program to a machine readable instruction. Then different web browsers like Chrome, Firefox, these things. You can run different database system to process, to store and process data. You can run multiple video games simultaneously. And the final component is the user, which actually interacts with the computer through those applications. So, this is a schematic diagram which actually shows the 4 components of a operating system. So, on bottom you have the computer hardware, then you have a operating system which actually help you to interact with the directly with the computer hardware and make a useful usage of hardware resources that you have. Now, to different kind of applications, you have multiple applications programs which executes on top of a operating system. Say for example, if you look into the Linux operating system architecture, so there are multiple types of operating system. You have the Windows operating system, you have something like Unix based operating system like the Android is a Unix based operating system. Then you have like this Linux operating system. So, if you look into any Unix based operating system or the Linux operating system, you will see that it actually says that there are 2 parts of this operating system. One is called the kernel space. That kernel space is actually this operating system space where different kind of operating system modules are there, and then the user space. So, let me just draw a diagram. So, if you look say Linux operating system, in a Linux operating system you will see there are 2 components, 2 broad components. One is called the kernel. So, this kernel part is the fundamental component of a operating system where you have different kind of OS modules. So, these OS modules are running inside the kernel. Then you have a user space. So, inside this user space you actually run multiple types of application programs. So, the application programs they gets executed inside the user space. So, that way this Linux operating system broadly separates the kernel space and the user space. And now, in our operating system course, the different type of OS modules that we will discuss, that is broadly the modules which are there inside the kernel space. So, that way then on bottom of the kernel space you have the hardwares. So, this kernel actually help to interact between the user space and the corresponding hardware, and your applications they are running in the user space. Inside the kernel you have multiple OS modules. So, these different OS modules it handles different aspects of operating system like how to effectively manage a memory, if multiple processes are requesting for some resource, how to allocate or how to distribute the resource among those multiple applications. So, this type of modules are executed inside the kernel space for a Linux based operating system. So, this particular topic we will look into details during our discussion. So, that gives you the broad view of the operating system. So, next let us look what are the different functionalities of operating system, what the operating systems actually do. So, that depends on the point of view. So, in different books you will find out different set of operation that they mention. There are some fundamental or the basic operations which are there inside the operating system. Apart from that, you can also embed your own functionality inside the operating system. Broadly it is like that the users want convenience like ease of use and good performance. So, user does not care about the resource allocation. So, for example, whenever you are running 2 applications, say a music player, a VLC music player and a say browser, you do not care about that how how your available memory, say the RAM space, that is divided between your VLC media player and your browser. So user doesn't care about such kind of resource allocation, but effective resource allocation is necessary to ensure good performance of operating system, good performance of your computer system. So that is basically done by the operating system. Then there are something called the shared computer architecture. Shared computer architecture means such as your mainframe computer or mini computer. So in case of a shared computer architecture, what happens that you have multiple hardware resources, or you have a single hardware resource. That single hardware resource, or you can say that you have a pool of hardware resources, and that pool of hardware resources are being accessed by multiple users simultaneously. So it is like that there are 10 users which are opening different terminals in a say system, in a computer system, which is basically a shared hardware. Or say for example, you have heard about this cloud computing in a cloud based system. So what happens in a cloud based system, that you have a single pool of hardware. So let me just draw a schematic diagram to explain that. Say in a cloud based system, you have a single hardware pool. So in this hardware pool, you have different hardware resources like memory. Say you have multiple RAMs that are there inside your hardware pool. Then you have multiple CPUs. Then you have multiple disks. Disk means the secondary storage space. So this single hardware pool, that is being shared by multiple users. Say user 1, user 2, user 3, user 4. So this same hardware pool is being shared by multiple users simultaneously. And how they share the resource? Say they make a remote login, say from your laptop or from your desktop, you make a remote login to this hardware pool, and then by doing this remote login, you can then run your application on this shared hardware pool. Now the question comes that when multiple users are using a common hardware pool, how will you distribute this resource among these multiple users so that every user becomes happy? So for example, say you are running, user 1 is running some video processing application. Okay. So if user 1 is running some video processing application, and this video processing application, they takes a lot of resource, they take significant amount of memory, they requires multiple cores in the CPUs. Now if user 1 is running such multiple applications, and if it takes the most of the available resources from this hardware pool, then it will affect the performance for user 2, user 3 and user 4. So that we do not want. We want a kind of fair system where every user becomes happy. So that is the task of the operating system, to ensure that every user gets whatever resource they want. Then it helps the users of dedicated systems such as workstation to have some kind of dedicated resources, but it also helps to frequently access the shared resource from server type of machines. Then you have, nowadays we have multiple handheld computers. So for example, your smartphone is nothing but a computer, a small computer. Now in these smartphones, the available resources are poor, so you do not have a significant amount of memory space or significant amount of CPU to run complex applications. So this operating system is actually help to optimize your resource usage, to ensure the usability as well as to ensure the battery life, so that the resource usage that you are doing, it considers the energy perspective and it runs in an energy saving manner. Then there are some computers which does not have sufficient resources, sufficient user interface or IO devices, or have some little IO devices such as embedded computers. So, for example, consider about this smart card. Say whenever you are punching a smart card, then the device that you have there you do not have a sophisticated input output device like a monitor or a keyboard. Then your operating system, so that time we call it as a real time operating system, that helps in to handle those resources in those particular kind of embedded computers. Now coming to the formal definition of a operating system. So here you can see there are the logos for some popular operating systems like this. This is for your Windows operating system, then Linux based operating system, your Mac OS, then Android, then iOS. So these are kind of embedded operating systems. This Android operating system and iOS operating systems which actually run on a smartphone. And as I have mentioned that whenever you are running operating system in a smartphone, you need to ensure the performance optimization of your application. So this kind of embedded operating system, they actually take care of those performance optimization. So coming to the formal definition of operating system, it is, so broadly we can say operating system is a resource allocator. So what is mean by resource allocator? It actually manages all the resources that you have in your hardware. Like you have your memory pool, you have your CPUs, you have your disk, you have your input output devices. So this operating system, it actually helps to manage all those resources. Then it decides between conflicting requests for efficient and fair resource use. What does it mean? Say whenever you are running multiple applications, say two applications want to display something simultaneously in a monitor. If that is the case, but you have a single monitor, so you cannot display multiple things simultaneously on a monitor. So that is why you have to make a scheduling which one to use, which application should use the monitor at what instance of time. So that is basically ensured by the operating system. So that is true for other resources as well, like your memory, your disk, your CPU. So for example, if you are running a single CPU machine, if you have a single CPU, so the question comes that can you run multiple applications on a single CPU? And the answer is yes, you can run it. And how do you run it? So the operating system is actually help you to run multiple applications on a single CPU. So it actually helps the application to switch themselves so that a single application use the CPU for some amount of time, then another application comes and it start using the CPU. So that way the operating system actually helps to for fair resource usage among multiple applications. Then we can also say that operating system is a control program. So it means that control execution of the programs, it control the execution of the programs to prevent the errors and improper use of computer. So for example, whenever you are running a C code and you have seen that during runtime you can also get some errors. Whenever say for example, whenever you are compiling a C code, during compile time you can get some error. If there is a compile time error, you can correct it and you can then again compile your C program. But during the run time, if there is some error, I guess that many of you have seen this segmentation fault error. So what does this segmentation fault means? So segmentation fault basically means that you have some error in the memory. Now if such kind of error happens, then the operating system ensures that your memory doesn't get corrupted because of those kind of segmentation fault. So in general, segmentation fault happen whenever you are going to access some part of the memory which the program should not access. So you are going to access some unallocated part from the memory. Now if access those part of memory, it may result in a memory corruption. So for example, one program is using one part of the memory and another program is or going to write something in the memory and it overrides the previous part, then you can have a memory corruption. So this operating system actually helps you to avoid such kind of memory corruption. So broadly there is no universally accepted definition of operating system, but what you can say like that everything of vendor ships when you order a operating system is a kind of good approximation, because you have multiple components in operating system. So, and it also depends from vendor to vendor. So, for example, the features that you have for a Windows operating system, the same set of features you do not have for a Linux based operating system. And another definition of operating system which is popular in the community is the one program running at all times on the computer. So, it is like that whenever you are switching on a computer, the operating system gets loaded and it keeps on running until you switch off the computer. So, and that particular part of the operating system is actually the kernel for a Unix based operating system that I have explained you earlier. And everything else is either a system program, this system program they ships with the operating system, or an application program that the user basically executes. Now, whenever you start a computer, typically it runs a bootstrap program. So, the bootstrap program is the first program that is being executed when you switch on a operating system. So, this bootstrap program is typically stored in the ROM, read only memory, or EPROM, which is generally known as the firmware. So, this bootstrap program initialize all different aspects of a system, and then this bootstrap program or the firmware, it loads the operating system that you have. So, for example, if you have a Linux based operating system in your machine, you will see that there is a bootstrap program which is called a grub. So, this grub basically initializes and then it loads your operating system. Similarly, if you have Windows operating system in your machine, Windows has its own inbuilt bootstrap program which basically get executed initially and then it loads the Windows operating system. So, bootstrap program is the first program or the firmware that loads initially whenever you switch on your computer. So, in case if you look into the computer system hardware component, you can have one or more CPUs, the central processing unit, which actually helps you to handle the computing parts of your program. Then you have the disk controller. The disk controller actually helps you to store the content or store the output of your program, or takes the input of the program from a secondary storage device, which is your hard disk. Then you have your USB controller. The USB controller actually helps you to handle say your input output devices like your mouse, keyboard, monitor, all these things. Then the graphics adapter, which actually connects the monitor to handle the display devices, and these are connected to the memory part. So, this memory is basically the primary memory of your system, which is the RAM, which we call in a hardware basis. So, ideally what happens in a hardware level, at the hardware level that the operating system actually handles. So, this memory and the IO controller is something which sits in the central. Then you have the CPU. The CPU executes one or more program. Now, when the CPU executes a program, during that time it may require some input output. Say for example, whenever you are running a C program, you may require some input from your keyboard, or you want to display something as output through the printf function. So, then you require access to these IO devices, or it may read something from the memory. So, there is this interfacing with this memory. Now, say for example, you have written a C program, and in that C program assume that you are basically taking two inputs from a user. Say you are taking two inputs in two variables, two integer variables, variable A and variable B, that you are taking as an input from the user, and then you are adding up those two variables A and B. So, you are adding them up and storing it another variable C. So, that is the purpose of your C program. Now, inside that you write something like a scanf. So, what does it scanf do? The scanf function basically takes the input from the user. So, say you have started executing a program and then you have execute a statement like scanf. During that time, what happens that your program need to wait until the user provides the input, and that particular input is that particular input is basically taken through which is called the interrupt. So, the operating system, it basically sends the interrupt, and then it keeps the program waiting and takes the input from the user. So, we will go to the details of this interrupt handling, how this interrupt is being handled in a operating system. Okay. So, that is the input output structure which is handled by a operating system. So, what happens, say let me again draw the whole thing using a diagram. So, in the context of this Linux based operating system, okay, in the context of Linux based operating system, what I have told you that you have the user applications. Okay, you have the user applications. So, you are running multiple applications here for the users, and then you have the kernel space. So, inside the kernel space you have different modules of operating system, and then you have the hardware. Say now let us consider the input output hardware. Okay. So, whenever you are running, say as a part of the user application, you are running a C program, and inside the C program you have put a scanf statement. So, whenever you have given a scanf statement, during that time this C program need to wait for some time and get the input from the user. And how does it work? The user application basically sends a signal to the operating system. That particular signal we call it a system call. So, system call is something through which the user space actually talks with the kernel space. So, once this kernel space or the kernel program inside your operating system gets this input that you have received the system call from a user program, then it generates a interrupt to the hardware. Okay. What is the purpose of this interrupt? So, this purpose of this interrupt is to stop the program momentarily and then transfer the control to your keyboard, because the user is going to give the input from the keyboard. Once the user gives the input from the keyboard, then again another interrupt is generated to the kernel, which actually tells the kernel that the user has already given the input, and then the kernel again executes some other system calls to resume the user program, and then this user program actually takes the input. Say you are getting some value A, so this inside this value whatever user has given, that particular thing is being stored, and then you use this variable for executing rest of your program. So, that way this user application actually works or actually interact with the hardware with the help of the system call. So, the system calls actually to the system call actually helps to send the instruction to the kernel, then the kernel executes its own process management module. So, we will go to the details. So, this is a process management module. So, this process management module actually handle this process and then sends the interrupt to the IO hardware, which actually then takes the input from the user, say take the input from the keyboard, and then generates another interrupt which tells the kernel that the user has already given the input, and finally the kernel transfer this variable, transfer the control to the corresponding program, and the program get executed further. Then you have the storage structure. So, I am quickly going through these things, but the basic philosophy is almost similar. So, in the storage structure you have the main memory, which is basically your random access memory or the RAM, and typically this is the volatile memory. So, whenever a program requires some input from the RAM, say for example, in a C program, whenever you are defining some integer variable or some floating point type variable, those variables are basically stored inside your RAM. So, those are basically stored inside your RAM address space. Say for example, if you have written a program using a pointer, you have seen that you get a address out of the value of the pointer. So, that address space is the address from the main memory. Then you have the secondary storage. The secondary storage are kind of non-volatile storage, which is the hard disk, where you store the data permanently. So, in case of your main memory, the data is not stored permanently. Whenever a program is being executed, during that time it uses the memory space. If you want to store some data permanently, you store it in the non-volatile storage like a secondary storage or the hard disk, and then you can have different kind of solid state disk like the faster hard disk, which are also non-volatile. So, this kind of solid state disk they are becoming much popular nowadays. Now, there are multiple levels of storage. So, if you look into the storage hierarchy, there are basically three types of storage architecture that we have. So, at the bottom we have the cache or the cache memory. So, this cache memory is the fastest memory. So, if you want to store something inside the cache, so the access to the cache is much faster. Even before the cache, you have some kind of register. So, these registers are the fastest memory module that you have inside your hardware. So, typically the system programs, they use this register. Then you have the cache memory, which is the next level of memory in terms of speed. After that, you have the main memory, or the RAM, and then finally you have the secondary storage, which is the, say, your hard disk. So, if you go from this top to bottom to top, you will see that the storage space increases. So, you have a very little amount of storage in case of register, then you have a size of the cache. Say for example, the register typically stores the data in amount of bytes, then you have cache memory, say few MB of cache memory, then you have main memory. Nowadays we have gigabytes of main memory, then you have the secondary storage, the hard disk, and nowadays we have a terabyte of hard disk. So, that way if you go from register to secondary storage, your storage space increases, but the access speed is in the reverse direction. So, if you go from top to bottom, your access speed drops or the access speed decreases. So, although register has less amount of memory size in the order of few kilobytes, but it is the fastest memory. Then you have the cache. So, speed of the cache is more than register, but less than the main memory. Similarly, the speed of a main memory it is less than cache memory, but more than the secondary storage memory, and the access speed to the secondary storage or the hard disk is maximum. Now, whenever you are running a program inside your computer, you need to ensure a good performance for that particular program. Now, if you want a good performance for that particular program, what you have to ensure that, say for example, if the program uses some memory space, you have to ensure that the memory access is fast. But the thing is that you are running multiple programs simultaneously, and you cannot ensure that the access speed for all the programs will be very fast, and the memory space for all the programs will be stored either in the register or in the cache or even at the main memory. So, that way the operating system, it needs to handle the memory distribution among those multiple processes in terms of that how many register you will allocate to a particular process, then how much amount of cache space it will allocate to a particular process, how much memory main memory space it will allocate to a particular process. So, this kind of memory management thing, it is being handled by your operating system memory management module. So, the memory management module of your operating system, it handles this memory allocation among multiple processes. So, these things I am skipping because I have already explained the concept of caching. Now, let us broadly look into the history of operating system, how the operating system has changed over time. So, if you look into the speed, capacity, cost and different parameters of operating system in the year of 1980 and whatever was there in the year of 2000, you will see that there is a kind of significant increase. So, for example, in 1980 your CPU was 1 MIPS CPU. Now, in 2000 it was something like 1000 MIPS CPU. If you look into the memory capacity was around 64 kilobytes in the year 1980 and it was around 128 megabyte in the year 2000, and nowadays in 2017 it is in the order of gigabytes. So, you can even connect some say 4 gigabyte or 8 gigabyte even more than that memory in your personal computer. But on the other hand, if you look into the cost has actually decreased substantially. So, earlier the cost was some $1000K in 1980 to execute one instruction, and now the cost is even less than $1, and in 2017 it is less than $0.01, something like that. So, what we see that as we are progressing, the availability or the performance of the system increases with a drop in cost. That actually motivates us to develop an indigenous operating system architecture which will actually take care of this multiple process or multiple application execution over dynamic environment, over huge amount of resources. Okay, so let us quickly go through the type of operating system that we had. So, in phase 1 of the operating system, when hardware was expensive, then we have the kind of mainframe hardware when you have a single hardware pool and multiple application access or multiple user was accessing that hardware simultaneously. Under that, this OS operation are mostly the human operator. So, you can handle one job or a single unit of processing at a time. The computer time was wasted while the operators walk around the machine room. So, a single computer was actually stored into multiple rooms, a mainframe computer, and the operator was mostly the human operator, and they have to move from one room to another room to execute a instruction. So, that was kind of early version of the operating system. During that time, everything you have to give the input as a kind of hardware instruction. The complex instruction was not there and the operating system was fairly simple. So, it was something like a kind of hardware only machine. Then in the phase 2, when hardware becomes cheap, so you have this terminal, then there was more efficient use of human resources, and we started to build something called a time sharing system. So, time sharing system means you have a single computer, single hardware resource, but you can have multiple terminals. Now, using multiple terminals, multiple user can log into your mainframe computer and they can execute the process one after another. So, that actually reduce the cost or reduce the time to move from one room to another room to execute a particular operation. Then under phase 3 of the operating system development, the hardware became very cheap, and then we had something called the personal computers. So, in the era of personal computers, the basic design goal of the operating system is first the multitasking. So, multitasking means the ability to run multiple programs on the same machine. So, we have started running multiple programs simultaneously, and then the multiple processing. Multiple processing means in a single machine you can have multiple processors. So, the idea is that you have multiple processors in your hardware and multiple applications which are running on top of that, and then you have to make a effective sharing of these processors among these multiple CPUs which are available. So, the operating system became much complex during this era. Then came the phase 4, the distributed system concept. So, we had the network, so the computer network which actually connected multiple computers simultaneously, and the idea was that you do not have a single operating system installed at every machine, rather we can have something like a distributed operating system which will span over multiple machines, and then it will give me a common pool of resource by combining all the individual hardware together. So, nowadays whenever we call like the cloud computing system is nothing but a kind of distributed operating system. So, inside cloud computing system you have a distributed operating system which actually handles multiple hardware resources simultaneously. So, the design goal of the operating system was the ease of resource sharing among the machines. So, if you look into the how a modern computer works, so I have already mentioned that. So, here is another schematic diagram to explain the process. So, you have the thread of execution which is a running process. Now, this running process, it can ask for the input output request, it can ask for the data from the memory, or it can send the interrupt. Say for example, during a running process, if you are sending a control C, if you are pressing control C from your keyboard, it basically sends an interrupt. Then you have something called the instruction and data in your memory, and during the process execution there is this continuous interaction between your CPU and your main memory, and in between your CPU main memory there is this cache system which actually helps in fast execution of a process. So, the memory part which requires very frequently, you can bring that memory part to the cache, and then this CPU takes the data directly from the cache and execute it, and if the data is not available in the cache, then it sends a request to the main memory and data is fetched from the main memory, and then it is get executed. Based on this complete hierarchy, complete OS process execution hierarchy, we have multiple modules in a operating system. So, to handle this multiple process execution, you actually have the process management module, then you have to handle the memory space effectively, you have memory management module, then to handle the input output request, you have the IO management module, then for handling the data to the secondary storage, we have another module called the disk management module. So, this whole operating system course actually consider these multiple modules and how these individual modules work and how they interact with themselves. So, as I have mentioned that a broad goal of today's operating system is to handle a multiple processors simultaneously, a multi-processing system and a multitasking system. So, in case of a multi-processing system, you have multiple processor in your machine. Now, how multiple processor helps? Whenever you are running some kind of complex application in your system, that particular application may require parallel execution of multiple processors. So, what you can do using multiple processors, that you can build up a parallel system which actually increase your throughput, which improve the scalability, then it also increase the reliability. So, in a multiprocessing system, you execute different part of your program parallelly using a maybe using a pipelining based system, and then you combine the result to get the final output. So, that is the purpose of multiple processing system, and the task of the operating system here is to handle how those multiple processes are basically shared among themselves. So, how those how the process, how a particular application can be divided into multiple sub application or sub process, and how that can be distributed among multiple processes. So there are two types of multiprocessing system. One is called the asymmetric multiprocessing, where each processor is assigned a special task, and there is something called a symmetric multiprocessing, where each processor perform all the tasks. So this is a broad architecture of a multiprocessing systems. You have multiple CPUs. Every CPU has its register and a cache, and then they are connected to a common memory pool. Now, whenever you are executing a program, you can divide the program into multiple parts, and every individual CPU can execute those parts parallelly. Now, there is another concept which is coming nowadays, which is basically called a multi-core system. So, the idea behind this multi-core system is that you have a single processing unit, but you have multiple core inside the processing unit. So, for example, this is a schematic diagram of a dual core system. So, in this system you have two CPU cores, and every individual core has its own register and cache, and they are connected to the main memory system pool, and these individual cores, they combine themselves, and they basically form the complete CPU architecture. So, the idea is that you do not have multiple CPUs, rather you have a single CPU, and you have multiple cores. Now, these multiple cores can execute multiple process simultaneously or in parallel. Now, there are two broad type of operating system structure. One is called a multi-programming system. So, in case of multi-programming system, the idea is that you have multiple processors inside your system, and then you are running multiple programming, and the task is to how to allocate those individual program or individual process to the corresponding processors. And there is another thing called a time sharing system or a multitasking system. In case of a multitasking system, you also have multiple tasks or multiple processes which are being executed in your system, but you have a single processor. And the idea there is that you actually allocate this CPU, the single CPU, to multiple process in a time sharing basis. That means every process will get some time to execute the corresponding program inside the CPU. So, to explain the things, let us use a diagram to explain the things. Now, in a multi-programming system, what happens that say you have multiple processes which are there. Okay. So, these are the individual process or program which are running in your machine, and assume that you have 3 CPUs, say CPU 1, CPU 2 and CPU 3. So, you have say here 6 individual programs which are in execution, and then you want to execute those programs with the help of 3 CPUs. Now, obviously, you cannot execute these 6 programs simultaneously in 3 CPUs. You have to choose 3 of them and then execute them inside the CPU. So, one program can get executed inside the CPU at a time. So, you have a OS module, operating system module, which actually do the process scheduling. So, for process scheduling, what it does, that this process scheduler selects one of this process out of these 6 process and put it in CPU 1. Then it selects another process and put it in CPU 2. Then it selects a third process and put it in CPU 3. Once those process execution gets completed, then it again selects the rest of the process and execute it to the corresponding CPU. So, you need to develop an algorithm or develop a mechanism for effectively execute this process inside the CPUs. So, for example, means I am just giving a kind of example, sample example. So, for example, this particular process, it takes 10 seconds to get executed, and all other process say take 1 second for execution. Now, if you just take this 10-second process first inside the CPU and then take the 1-second process, then this 1-second process or 1-second program need to wait for 10 seconds, because you have taken the longest program first to get executed. So, it may affect the waiting time for other small processes. So, you have to actually develop a mechanism so that the process scheduling gets effectively you can schedule this multiple process in the multiple CPUs. So, this is called a multi-processing system. Then this is one. Okay. Let us resume the discussion. So, what we are discussing? We are discussing about the multi-processing system and the multitasking system. So, what we have looked into that in case of your multi-processing system, you have multiple processors and then you have the processes, and the task of the operating system, or better to say the task of the process scheduling block of the operating system, is to allocate these processes among the CPUs. So, that is the idea of the multiprocessing system. Then we have another mode of operation which is called the multitasking system. So, in case of a multitasking system, so multitasking system, or sometime it is called as time sharing system. In a multitasking system or a time sharing system, you have a single CPU and then you have multiple processes which needs to be get executed in this CPU. Now, how this process scheduling works in this particular case, that say the CPU time, whatever be the CPU time, I divide it into all these multiple processes. Say we define something called a time quanta. Say my time quanta is 1 second. If my time quanta is 1 second, then this process will be taken to the CPU and the process will get executed for 1 second. Again this will taken back. So, we have a queue where all these processes are basically waiting. So, this particular thing we call it as a process queue. So, in the process queue all processes are waiting. So, the CPU takes the first process, execute it for say 1 second, send it back to the process queue, then it takes the second process, execute it here, takes it back to the queue, then it takes the third process, execute it for 1 second, send it back. So, that way after this fifth process gets completed, or it execute the fifth process for 1 second, then again it takes the first process and execute it for another 1 second. So, that way this particular system we call it as a time sharing system or a multitasking system, where the CPU is time shared between these multiple processes. So, this is the broad difference between these two mode of operation, the multitasking system and the multiprocessing system. So, the process scheduling block in the operating system actually takes care of this multiprocessing and the multitasking activity. Okay. So, this is the things we are discussing, the multi-programming environment or multi-processing environment and the time sharing and multitasking environment. So, these are the two broad structure in which the operating system works. In case of a multi-program system, this is the memory layout. You have the operating system which is stored in your main memory. Then you have multiple jobs which are there. So, these jobs are taken and they get executed in your CPU. So, to handle this multiple process, we have something called a process management module. So, in operating system, as we have discussed that we have multiple modules, we have the process management module which handles these multiple processes in the system. Then we have the memory management module which handles the memory in the system. Then we have this disk management module which handles the disk handling, the hard disk handling inside the operating system. Then you have the IO management module, which actually handles the input output operations which are there in your system, which are required when you execute a particular process. So, first we will discuss about this process management. So, before going to what is process management, let us see what is mean by a process. So, a process is basically a program in execution. What is basically means, it is like whenever you are writing a C program, it is a passive entity. So, you have written a C program, say you have written the hello world program, say has in so inside your program you have just having a single printf statement which is printing the statement like hello world, and you have written this program, then you have compiled it using your GCC compiler or any other C compiler, then you have generated the executable file and you have stored it. So, up to this part your program, which is a passive entity, now whenever you are actually executing the program, say if your executable file name is a.out, whenever you are executing it like ./a.out, the program which is in execution, during that time it is called a process. So, that is the broad thing process means. So, every process is a single program which is in execution. Now, well, there can be a single program can have multiple processes as well, we will go to that part. So, this process then needs resources to accomplish its task. So, those resources can be CPU resources, memory resources, IOs, files and some initialization data which are being stored in the registers. Then the process termination, once the process execution gets completed, the process need to be terminated, and whatever resources the process was using, that need to be returned back to the common resource pool. Now, there can be a single threaded process or a multi-threaded process. A process can have multiple parallel threads. Later on we will go to the details or the difference between the thread model and the process model, but a process can have multiple threads. For the time being, let us consider a process with a single thread. So, every process has a program counter. So, this program counter actually tells me that from where I should start the next execution. Say if you look into the way this process work, so every process is basically a set of instruction. Say you have set of instructions like say move a mx. So, this is basically moving the content of mx to a. Then say another instruction like move b my, you are getting the content of memory location y and putting it to value register b. Then say add a b c, here you are adding the results of a and b and storing the result to c. Then say another instruction move mz c, you are basically storing the value c to the memory location z. Now, whenever you are executing this particular program, that program becomes process, and there is a special register called a program counter or PC. Okay, so PC or program counter. So, initially whenever you are processing or you are executing a process, this program counter points to your first instruction. So, once this first instruction get executed, then the value of the program counter gets increased and it then point to the next instruction in your instruction set. That way, this program counter, this special register program counter, it actually handles the sequence of execution for the instructions that you have in your process. Then for multi-threaded process, you can have one program counter for each thread, each individual thread. So, typically a system has many processes. Some process can be user process, some process can be the operating system process which actually run concurrently to one or more CPUs. Now, this concurrency is handled by either by the multi-programming environment or a multi-thing environment, and this concurrency is ensured with the help of process or with the help of threads. So, the specific difference between process and threads are in terms of how they actually share the memory space. Now, the operating system is responsible for this activity, this set of activities in connection with the process management. First is creating and deleting both the user and system processes. So, we can have two types of process, the user process which are being generated from the user applications. Then you can have the system processes which are a part of the operating system. Then the second task is to suspend and resume the process. I will talk about how this suspending and resume a process come into picture. Then the third is the providing mechanism for process synchronization. Process synchronization means, say, if you are running multiple processes, those processes need to be synchronized. So, for example, you are running, assume that you are running something in your memory, say you are running a process which actually takes care the file management. Say you are writing something in a file. Okay. So, assume a scenario similar to this. So, assume a scenario that you have a single file and there are two processes. One is this process A, another one is this process B. Now, process A read something from the file and process B write something to this file. Okay. So, if that is the case, then you can see that we need a synchronization between this process A and process B. Why? Because when process B is going to write something, during that time if process A tries to read the file, it will actually get the old content or an incomplete content. Or the scenario is more complicated if process A also want to write something to this file. Say both process A and process B, they are going to write something in the file. If that is the case, then we need some synchronization between process A and process B. So, whenever process A is writing something to the file, process B should not write. Otherwise, what will happen? Whatever they are going to write, they will get overlapped with each other, which is not the intended case. So, that is why we need to maintain the synchronization among these two processes, which is a task of this process management module. Okay, so there are a couple of questions. So, I will take the last 5 to 10 minutes to cover this question. So, well, let me just answer these two questions. One question was this, which is effective among time sharing or multiprocessing. Now, it depends on whichever is effective. Say for example, in general, in a typical computer system, we actually use simultaneously, we implement both multitasking as well as multi-programming simultaneously. In general, what happens? You have some number of CPUs and you have more number of processes. Now, we are actually doing multi-programming by allocating, say the example that I have given you, you have 3 CPUs and you have 6 processes. Now, what you can do? You can divide those 6 processes in the group of 3. Now, you can have this 3 group, the processes in a single group to execute in the form of a multi-programming environment, and the execution among multiple groups in a time sharing environment. That way, we actually handle the system in a typical OS concept. So, we implement both multi-programming as well as time sharing simultaneously. Apparently, there is no such comparison that which one is more effective. It depends on the amount of resource that you have. So, if you have more number of CPUs, then you go for a multi-programming environment. If you have a single CPU, you cannot even use a multi-programming environment. You have to go with a time sharing or multitasking environment. Okay, Coming back to the topic, so we are discussing about the different tasks which are there in connection with the process management. So the providing mechanism for process synchronization, then providing mechanism for process communication. Multiple process need to communicate with each other. So OS provide a mechanism so that the processes can communicate with each other and they can share data among themselves. And then providing mechanism for deadlock handling. So this deadlock thing, what is mean by deadlock, how we can handle it, or whether at all we handle it in today's system, that I will discuss later on. Then we have this memory management module. So I am skipping this slide for the time being. We will discuss the different tasks of memory management during the subsequent. Then we have the storage management, which actually handles the secondary storage in a operating system, and the services which are provided by the operating system, that we have already discussed. So the operating systems provide functionality to support this user interface. So to provide multiple user interfaces. So nowadays most of these operating systems are graphical user interfaces or GUI interfaces. So some old operating systems, some Linux based operating systems are kind of uses the command line interfaces. Then it helps this program execution and the different kind of IO operations. Then it helps in file system manipulation, how to store the files in the disk in an effective way. The communication between multiple processes or multiple programs which are there inside your, which are running inside your operating system. Then the error detection and correction module, actually during the execution there can be multiple errors which can occur. So operating system actually takes care of those error detection and correction. Then this resource allocation, accounting, protection and security, these are kind of secondary tasks for the operating system. So it maintains different kind of logs to account whatever event which are being executed inside your operating system. Also it provides security to multiple processes or multiple applications which are running in your operating system. So this is the broad diagram of different component of operating system. You have this process management module, you have the IO operation, the file system, the communication module, the resource allocation module, accounting module, the security module, error detection and correction module. These are different modules that provide different type of services in the operating system. And then the user part, it provides multiple type of user interfaces, the command line interface or the graphical user interface, or a kind of batch interface, which is a mix of both UI and CLI interface. So coming to the concept of process, so as we have mentioned that operating system executes the variety of program, something like a batch system. A batch system means we are giving multiple jobs together to complete in operating system. Then they divide that jobs into multiple process and execute them, or in case of a time shared system, you have different user programs or tasks that need to be executed in a time sharing manner. Now many of the textbook you will see that this term job and process, they are used almost interchangeably, both actually indicate the same thing. Now the formal definition of process is a program in execution. So the process execution must progress in a sequential manner. So if you have dependency among multiple processes, you need to execute it in a sequential manner. So if the output from the first process is given as an input to the second process, then you need to first execute the first process and then only you can execute the second process. Now a process can have multiple parts. The first part is the program code, which is called the text section. Then the current activity, including the program counter, which actually indicates the instruction that need to be executed, the different processor register, the stack, which actually contains the temporary data which is required to execute the process. So one of you have sent a question like, what are the components which are there in memory during a process execution? So these are the components, the stack memory components. Then the data section actually stores the global variable, and then the heap part of the memory. So this heap that contains the dynamic memory part which is allocated during runtime. So if you run a C program, you have seen that a C program can have pointer. So using pointer you can do a dynamic memory allocation. So if you do a dynamic memory allocation using pointer, that particular memory component is stored inside a heap. Now in a stack, the static part of the memory, the temporary data which are being used during program execution, they are being stored, such as the function parameters. Whenever you are calling a function, the function parameters need to stored in the stack, and on calling of the function, that parameter need to be fetched. Then the return addresses, the local variables which you are defining in a program. So those kind of variables, those kind of parameters, they are stored in the stack part of the memory, and in the heap part of the memory you basically put the dynamically allocated address. The in case of a C program, the part which you do the dynamic memory allocation using malloc or calloc function using a pointer. So there is one question which tells about the bugs and errors. So bugs and errors, bug is something which is there in your program itself, that is not in the process. So for example, whenever you are running a program, you are building up some complicated application. Inside that complicated application, you have made some logical mistakes in your program. It is not a mistake that can be detected compile time, but it is a kind of logical mistake. Logical mistake means, say you have to say, for example, your program is to generate a Fibonacci number, and to generate a Fibonacci number, rather than just adding up two consecutive numbers, you have say subtracted two consecutive number. That is a kind of bug which a programmer has made while writing the program. And the error which can have in an operating system, they are kind of dynamically generated. So for example, the segmentation fault that I have mentioned earlier, like whenever you are executing a process, during that time it is trying to access some part of the memory which is not allocated to that particular process, then it generates a memory error, which is the segmentation fault. So that is the broad difference between a bug and a error. Okay. So coming back again to our concept of process. So yeah. So as we have mentioned already, the program is the passive content which is entirely stored in the disk in the terms of a executable file, and the process is the active part of it when you execute a particular program. Now this execution of the program, it may be started in GUI via mouse click, or you can use command line to execute a program, and a single program can have multiple processes. So so you have a way to generate multiple child process from a particular program using some specific system call. So this is the memory part which is being stored for different processes. So you have the stack component of the memory. So this stack component of the memory where we store the local variables, the return address, all this, the function parameters, all these things. Then you have the dynamic part of the memory, which is the heap memory, which is being allocated at runtime using your malloc or calloc type of function in your C program. Then you have the data part. The data part basically stores whenever you are fetching some data from the secondary storage, say for example the files which you require to run a process. Say for example your process is, or your program is doing some kind of file handling, then you need to fetch the file from the disk to our main memory, and that file is being stored in the data part. And finally the text part, which actually stores the different instructions of your program. So this is the memory hierarchy for a process. Now whenever a process get executed, it actually changes state. So that particular state changing, we call it as a process state transition diagram. So this is an important concept in operating system. So a process can be one of these 5 states. Either it is a new process. So new state, the new state is when the process is being created. Then the running state. The running state means the one of the instruction of that process, it is currently being executed. It can be in the waiting state. That means the process is waiting for some event to occur. So for example, you have put a scanf statement in your program. If you have put a scanf statement in your program, then you have the process actually keeps on waiting. The process goes to the waiting state until the user provides the input via the keyboard. So that is the waiting state. The ready state is that the process has received the input from the user, or the process is basically ready to get executed. So the process has put to a queue which we call as a ready queue, and the process is ready to get executed. So that is the ready queue, and the terminated. Terminated means the process has finished the execution. Now this state transition, we can represent it in terms of the state transition diagram, which is an important concept in a process management. So whenever a new process come, it is in the new state, then it gets admitted to a queue where all the processes are waiting to get executed. So if you think about a time sharing system or a multi-programming system, the process first put in a queue, as I have mentioned, and then you have a process scheduler which actually takes the process from the queue and execute it. So when the process is inside the queue, it is in the ready state. Then the scheduler can take the process, that is the scheduler dispatch. The process scheduler can take a process from the ready queue and put it in the running state. Now when the process is in the running state, there can be two things: either it can wait for an IO event, in that case it is in the waiting state, or it can get some interrupt. Interrupt means you have made a control C or some other process is being executed. So for example, in a time sharing system. In a time sharing system, you have given 1 second time counter to every process. That means after 1 second gets completed for a current process, the scheduler fetches the next process, and before that it sends a interrupt and put back the currently running process again to the ready queue. So that is the concept of interrupt. And in the other case, if the process itself is waiting for some IO or input output, then it goes to the waiting state. Once it gets the input from the user from the waiting state, it again moves back to the ready state. And once the process execution is complete, it exits and it moves to the terminated state. So a process can be one of these 5 states, and it can change its state based on this transition. So there are few important concepts here. One is the scheduler concept, which actually schedule a process, and the interrupt concept, which actually moves back a process from the running state to the ready state. So we will talk about how these interrupts are being handled and how the scheduler actually schedule a process from a ready state to the running state. Okay. Now whenever you are moving the process in between the states, say for example, currently the process is in the running state, that means it has already executed some part of the instructions, and then a interrupt comes, or because of an IO it moves to the waiting state to the ready state, or because of an interrupt it moves from the running state to the ready state. Then to resume the execution from the next instruction, it has to store something in its memory. So what things it store? It is the process control block. So whatever information a process is required to resume its execution or to execute it, that particular information is called the process control block. Sometimes it is also called the task control block that contains the information associated with each process. So what are the various information which are being associated? They are the process state, what is the current state of the process, the program counter value, the location of the next instruction that need to be fetched, the CPU register, the content of all process centric registers, the CPU scheduling information. So for example, whatever scheduling algorithm you are implementing, based on that the specific information, the memory management information, whatever memory space which are being allocated to the process, the accounting information, the amount of CPU is used, the clock time which is elapsed since start, the time limits with which the process need to be executed, all this information, and the IO status information, the IO devices which are currently being allocated to the process, such as the list of open files. So these are the information a process basically stores it inside its process control block. So this is the way the process works. Say you have say 2 process P0 and process P1. Say process P0 start execution. Once it gets an interrupt or a system call, it saves the state into the process control block, and then once this interrupt handling is complete, it reload the state from the process control block. Now this process P1, it starts executing after reloading the content from the process control block of state 1. Again, once it received the system interrupt or system call, it stop executing and store the data in the process control block. Then after some time, this process P0 again start executing by reloading the data from the process control block of its own. So, it is like that whenever a process is getting stopped because of some interrupt or a system call, it save the data in the corresponding process control block, and whenever it get resumed, it read the data from the process control block and start executing it. Now, coming to another concept called threads. So far we have considered that a single process has a single thread of execution, but in general a process can have multiple threads, and the difference between these threads and the process is that every process has their own stack memory and the heap memory, but the threads which are there inside the process, they basically share the stack memory whichever being allocated to a process. So, the threads actually share a common memory space, whereas every individual process has their own memory space. So, that is the broad difference between a process and a thread. So, I am repeating again, for different process you have completely different memory in terms of your stack memory and the heap memory, but in case of threads, the threads which belongs to a single process, they basically share a common memory space which is allocated to the process. So, that way the threads can use the common memory space to communicate between themselves, whereas for the process to process communication you will require separate mechanism for inter-process communication. So, there is one question that what is the difference between device queue and the waiting queue. Just wait for a few minutes, I will come to that particular part, the different type of queues which are being used during process scheduling. So, this is a way a process is basically represent. So, in case of your standard operating system like Unix based operating system, the whole Unix operating system is actually implemented using C programming language, and every process is basically represent in terms of a structure called task struct, and inside that structure you have multiple variables like the process ID, the state of the process, then the time slice for which the process use the time sharing system, then the children process for a parent process. So, that way it store multiple variables inside that particular structure. So, now coming to this queue question that one of you have asked. So, this process scheduling, what it does? So, it basically takes the in a multitasking environment, it basically takes one of the process from a queue and executes it. Now, this process scheduler, it basically selects among available processes for the next which need to be executed. Now, this scheduler maintains multiple scheduling queues for the process. One is the job queue. In the job queue, the set of all processes in the system, they are basically kept in the job queue. Now, when a process is ready for being execution, that means the set of all processes residing in the main memory which are ready and waiting to get executed, that are stored in the ready queue. The device queue, that is the set of process which are waiting for an IO device. So, for example, you have a single keyboard and you are having two processes which requires input from the user, then they are being waited in the device queue, because you have a single keyboard. So, you cannot give input to both the processes simultaneously, you have to give the input one after another. So, that is basically handled by the device queue, and the process during the scheduling part, the process basically migrates among multiple of these. So, this is the thing that in the ready queue you keep all the processes, the header, so you actually keep the process control block of the multiple process that contains the corresponding PCB variable. So, that way we put the processes in a particular queue, and this is the broad idea behind the process scheduling. Initially the process is put into the ready queue, then you have a single CPU. The scheduler, it basically takes the process from the ready queue, put it in the CPU, and during the IO request the process is put to the IO queue or the device queue. Once the IO operation is completed, then the process is again put into the ready queue. Then if the time slice expired for a time sharing system, the process, there is an interrupt and the process is put back in the ready queue. If you have a child process, then also the child gets executed and it is put into the ready queue. If some other interrupt occurs, then the process waits for an interrupt. Then once this interrupt occurs, the process is put into the ready queue. That way the process migrates between multiple of these. So today I am stopping here. So in the next class we will talk about the scheduler and how this scheduler basically works. So for the time being, so I can see the questions that you have already posted. The one question is that what are the events that make process move from running to waiting state. So there can be multiple events. When a process is running, during that time the process may wait for an IO, input output operation. Like in the program you have given us a scanf instruction. If you have given a scanf instruction, the process is moved to the device queue. Once it gets the input, then again it is put back to the ready queue. Then in the second case, say in a time sharing system, as we have talked, that every process gets a time share to get executed in the CPU, and that particular time share we call it as a time slice. Now if the time slice expires, then also the process is put to the ready queue from a running state. The third thing is the interrupt. Say whenever a process is running, during that time if it receives some interrupt, the interrupt can be from multiple reasons. I will discuss later on during the scheduling part that what are the different type of interrupts that can happen. Because of the interrupts, a process can also move from the running state or the execution state to the ready state. So it is being moved to the ready state. Once the interrupt is handled, then again it can bring back to the running state. So that is the one question. Then the second question is there any standard notation to differentiate process and thread? So standard notation means, say for example, if you are implementing the things in the form of a C program, in C program you have different ways to implement a process and a thread. So there is the different system calls like the fork. So in the next class I will discuss about this fork system call. So using fork system call you can create a new process, and there is something called a pthread. So pthread is one of the threading thread creation and thread handling process which are being there in your standard C programming language. But the broad difference between this process and thread is what I have mentioned, that every process has its separate memory space. So separate memory space in the terms of the stack space and the heap space. But whatever memory space is allocated to a process, all the threads under that particular process share the memory space which is being allocated to the process. So the threads use a common memory pool. So every thread does not have their individual stack memory space and the heaps memory space. They share a common memory pool for this stack and the heap memory purpose. Then another question is that what is the difference between a bootstrap program and a bootloader? So a bootstrap program is basically used to load the operating system. Say for example, in case of your Linux operating system, this grub, grub is a bootstrap program which actually loads the operating system. Now bootloader, sometime bootloader can be a part of a bootstrapping program, but sometime the bootloader can be something different, because bootloader is something which is more specific to hardware, which is you can say the BIOS. So in a computer, typical computer, you have something called a BIOS, binary input output operation, the full form of BIOS is. So this BIOS is actually a bootloader. So the basic idea is that whenever you switch on a computer, then it check the power state. Power state means it check whether the computer is receiving sufficient power to get all the hardware executed. If it receives sufficient power, then it first fetch a particular program from a fixed memory space inside your ROM. So that particular program is called a bootloader. So the task of the bootloader is to initiate all the hardware that you have. So for example, the RAM, the hard disk, the CPU, all these individual components also need to be initialized. So that are being initialized by a bootloader. Now once those individual components are being initialized, then the bootstrap program gets loaded, and once the bootstrap program gets loaded, then the bootstrapping program actually load the specific operating system. Say I can give you one example. Say for example, say if you have a dual booting system, like in your system you have say Windows and Linux both are installed, and you are using say the graph bootstrapping program to either select Windows or to select the Linux, then you will see that initially the bootloader gets executed. The bootloader initiates all the hardwares, and then it load the bootstrapping program, that is the graph. Then using graph you can specify whether you want to load a Windows or whether you want to load a Linux. So if you select a Linux, then the bootstrapping program, it basically load the Linux operating system. If you select Windows, then it loads the Windows operating system. So that is the broad difference between the bootstrapping program and the bootloader. So the bootloader handles the hardware initialization, whereas the bootstrapping program, it handles the OS initialization. Okay, how do you know which scheduling algo in our OS is currently using? So the specific scheduling algorithm that OS actually use that varies from OS to OS. So for example, the Linux operating system by default it use called a multi-level feedback queue scheduling algorithm, which is a complex scheduling algorithm. Say then normally your Android operating system, it uses a time sharing algorithm, a round robin algorithm along with a multi-level feedback queue algorithm. So it is specific to operating system, and to know that what type of scheduling algorithm a particular operating system is using, there are two ways. Either you can Google for it to find it out, or the best way would be to look into the OS source code. So many of these operating systems are open source, so you can download the Linux kernel, and if you look into the Linux kernel environment, you will see that the Linux kernel environment has a nice hierarchy of putting the source code for individual OS management modules. Like you will see that there is a folder for memory management, the name of the folder is MM. Then there is a folder for process scheduling, there is a folder for disk management, there is a folder for networking. Now if you look into the, if you start looking into the kernel source code, you will get more idea about how the system is actually implemented. So in general in the course we talk about or we learn about the basic scheduling algorithm, but most of our modern operating system, they use some combination of a scheduling algorithm. It is not like that at one instance of time it is using one scheduling algorithm, or at another instance of time it is using another scheduling algorithm. Many a time it depends on what are the hardware resources you have, then what are the applications you are running. Some scheduling algorithms are application specific, some scheduling algorithms are device specific, the type of device that you are going to access, but in general they use something called a multi-level feedback queue scheduling. So that we will discuss briefly in the next. So the process scheduling is actually implemented in any operating system, not only a Linux operating system. So in any operating system, whenever you have multiple processes, you have to have a component of process scheduling, because see in any of this multitasking or multi-programming environment, any operating system that you can consider like Linux, Windows, your Android operating system, your iOS operating system, you will see that you are actually running multiple processes simultaneously. So you are doing multiple tasks. So even in your Windows operating system, you have open browser, you have open dock, Windows, there are multiple system processes which are also running. Then you may be playing in background a VLC media player, you have a Dropbox application which is syncing the data in the background. That way we run multiple processes in our operating system, and whenever you are running multiple processes in your operating system, but at the end your available hardware resource is limited. You have a single CPU, or what maximum you can have with the age of Pentium, you can have a multi-core CPU. But the available CPU resource or the available memory resource, it is very limited compared to whatever number of process you are executing in your system. So that is why you need to always implement some kind of process scheduling algorithm. So any operating system, they actually implement the process scheduling algorithm. So another question is that what type of special tasks that run in asymmetric multiprocessing system? So in case of asymmetric multiprocessing system, the idea is that you cannot load all the process to all the CPUs. So for example, a typical example can be nowadays many workstation and even some desktop come with a GPU processor, graphical processing unit. Now this graphical processing unit, it is not useful for general purpose processing. So for example, if you are running a simple C program, there is no need to load that program on a GPU. So it is like that the GPU is a special purpose processor which actually executes some complex task like a video processing, like if you want to execute some computationally heavy tasks that are being executed on GPU. Now the OS need to understand that which particular process it should allocate to the CPU, the general purpose processor, and the GPU processor. Say if it simply runs a C program to a GPU processor and keep the CPU processor idle, that is just a wastage of resource or a underutilization of resource that the OS doesn't want. So whenever you have this kind of asymmetric multi-programming environment and you have these different kind of processors like a general purpose processor and a GPU processor, the OS need to understand the capability of every processor and accordingly need to determine which particular process it should load to the general purpose processor and which particular process to load to a GPU processor. Okay, so these are all the questions that I can see currently. So thank you all for attending today's lecture. So in the next class, we will talk about the different process scheduling algorithm, and as well as we will discuss about the few system calls through which you can generate the child process and you can actually work with the child process. Okay, so thank you to all of you for attending the today's lecture. Bye bye.